A shrill, terrified 911 call blares over the police scanner, its static-laced urgency rattling nerves. "There's an armed man on my street. He's coming for me. I need help now." The dispatcher's measured reply is nearly drowned out by the caller's escalating hysteria. Cut to a barren, dusty gravel road where a monstrous red tractor roars by. Hank, a rugged, weather-beaten farmer clad in heavy work boots and a time-worn flannel, swipes a thick sheen of sweat from his brow. His eyes widen in disbelief as a phalanx of police cars hurtles toward him, sirens wailing and churning a turbulent cloud of dust. An ominous voiceover slices into the tension, dripping with menace. What happens when an entitled HOA Karen goes too far? The explosive finale will shock you. Rewind a few hours. The early morning sun casts a fierce golden blaze over Hank's sprawling farm, its fields stretching relentlessly beyond the manicured borders of newly minted suburban estates. Hank is quietly immersed in his work until the piercing, enraged voice of Karen Pierce, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, shatters the calm. Standing rigid at the property line with hands planted authoritatively on her hips, Karen's impeccably pressed slacks and pastel cardigan scream of suburban dominance. Behind her, a cadre of eager HOA board members hang on her every word, all eyes burning with anticipation for conflict. "Hank!" Karen snaps, her tone sharp as broken glass. "We need to talk." Hank barely glances up, his voice laced with dry defiance. "Unless you're here to buy eggs, I ain't got time for your drama." Karen's lips tighten into a thin line of scorn. "This," she gestures dramatically toward his rugged land, "is undermining our community's property values. We simply can't allow free-range chickens and that foul odor to decimate our pristine neighborhoods." Dropping his shovel with calculated calm, Hank dusts off his weathered hands. "Lady, my family's been tilling this land for generations. Your petty HOA rules don't count here." With a condescending smirk, Karen steps forward, eyes flashing with arrogance. "That's where you're tragically mistaken. This area is evolving into a refined community. The board and I have decreed that unsightly, disorderly farms have no place next door to our homes." Hank leans on his shovel, a slow, mocking smile creeping across his face. "Good luck enforcing that." Karen's expression morphs into a mix of irritation and forced civility as she dons a saccharine, patronizing smile. "I was hoping we could resolve this amicably. But if you won't comply, we have other means to make you." Hank lets out a bitter chuckle, shaking his head in disbelief. "You can't possibly enforce HOA rules on land that's never been in your jurisdiction." Her eyes narrow dangerously, but she says nothing more. With a turn of her heel, Karen marches off, her entourage hurrying in tow like an armed retinue. Hank watches them fade into the distance, shaking his head. He's weathered far worse from meddlesome suburban tyrants, yet this encounter stokes a simmering sense of impending chaos he never could have imagined. The next morning, Hank wakes up to find his fence plastered with notices from the HOA. Bold letters declare that he is in violation of neighborhood beautification standards. A cease and desist letter is stuffed into his mailbox, accusing him of unauthorized livestock activities. Hank lets out a loud laugh as he rips the papers off his fence. These people must be out of their damn minds. That afternoon, as he loads hay into the back of his truck, a line of SUVs rolls up. Karen and a group of HOA board members step out, dressed as if they're about to host a garden club meeting rather than confront a farmer. A man in a stiff suit clears his throat. "Mr. Reynolds, as per the HOA's new bylaws, you are required to remove all livestock and cease agricultural activity within 30 days. Hank raises an eyebrow. "New bylaws? Ain't I not part of the HOA? Karen steps forward, a smug grin on her face. "We've expanded the HOA jurisdiction. You're now part of our community, whether you like it or not." Hank folds his arms. That's not how property rights work. Karen's grin falters for just a moment before she regains her composure. "We have legal counsel who says otherwise." Hank shrugs. "Well, I got common sense, which says you got no authority over me." Karen's jaw clenches. "You'll regret this, Hank. Just wait." She turns on her heel and storms off. Hank watches her go, shaking his head. He figures she'll run out of steam soon enough. But that night, under the cover of darkness, Karen puts her next plan into action. At midnight, a group of landscapers arrives, hired by the HOA. They move fast, tearing out parts of Hank's crops, removing what they claim to be overgrown weeds. By the time Hank hears the commotion and rushes outside, half his field has been trampled, with wheelbarrow tracks leading to piles of discarded plants near the road. Rage boils in Hank's chest as he storms toward them, shotgun in hand, not raised, just held casually the way a farmer would when checking his land. The landscapers freeze. "What in the hell do you think you're doing?" Hank growls. One of the men stammers, glancing toward Karen, who stands off to the side, arms crossed. Karen smirks. "Just making sure the community stays beautiful. You're trespassing." Hank's voice is low and dangerous. "You're trespassing." Karen waves a dismissive hand. "Oh, please." This is all within the HOA's authority. That's when she sees it, the shotgun resting in Hank's hands. Her eyes widen, and a sickeningly triumphant look crosses her face. She whips out her phone and dials 911. "Yes, hello? There's an armed man threatening my life." Hank blinks, incredulous. "You have got to be kidding me." Karen takes a dramatic step back, raising her voice. "He's waving a gun. Please send someone before he shoots me." Hank shakes his head in disbelief as he hears the distant wail of sirens. He looks down at the shotgun in his hands, realization dawning. This isn't just Karen playing HOA dictator. This is a setup. Moments later, red and blue lights flood the dark road. Police cars skid to a stop and officers jump out, taking defensive positions. A voice booms over a loudspeaker. "Sir, drop the weapon." Hank's eyes widen. "Ain't this just great?" Behind him, Karen is smirking. She thinks she's won, but she has no idea what's coming next. The squad cars come to a screeching halt on the gravel road, red and blue lights flashing against the backdrop of Hank's farm. Officers take defensive positions, hands hovering over their holstered weapons. "Sir, drop the weapon," one of them shouts. Hank exhales sharply, glancing at the shotgun still resting in his hands. He's held it thousands of times before, just a tool of the trade, no different from a shovel or rake. But in this moment, with Karen's hysterical wailing in the background, he realizes how bad this looks. Slowly and carefully, he sets the shotgun down. "I ain't threatening nobody," he says, his voice calm but firm. Karen, standing off to the side with a look of faux terror plastered on her face, clutches her chest. "He pointed it at me. He was screaming, threatening to kill me." One of the officers glances at her, then at Hank. "Sir, is that true?" Hank scoffs. "I was standing on my own damn property, holding my gun like any farmer would." "She's lying." Another voice cuts through the night. "I got it all on video." The small crowd of neighbors that had gathered on the edge of the road shifts, revealing a younger man with his phone held up. It's Mark, one of the newer homeowners, but not the HOA-obsessed type. He steps forward, holding out his phone to the nearest officer. "Cop, take it. Press play." Karen's dramatic shrieking continues in the background, but the video shows the truth. Hank never once pointed the gun at anyone. In fact, he barely moved before she started dialing 911. The officers exchange glances. One of them sighs, rubbing his temple. "Ma'am, are you sure you want to stick to this story?" Karen's confidence wavers for a split second before she doubles down. "That video doesn't show everything. He was threatening me before the camera started rolling." Hank folds his arms, watching the officers expectantly. He can tell they're starting to realize what's really going on here. The lead officer shakes his head. "Ma'am, filing a false police report is a crime." Karen's face drains of color. "What? No, you said he was threatening your life with a firearm." "That's a serious accusation, and from what we see in this video, that doesn't seem to be the case." Karen's eyes dart around, searching for support, but the small crowd of neighbors has turned against her. Someone mutters, "Unbelievable." Another chuckles, shaking his head. Hank smirks. "So, we done here?" The officer nods. "You're free to go." Karen lets out a strangled noise of frustration, but she knows she's lost this round. The police leave, and the crowd starts to disperse. But Hank knows this isn't over. Karen doesn't strike him as the type to admit defeat. If anything, this has probably made her even more determined. The next morning, his suspicions are confirmed. Hank wakes up to an official letter from the county zoning office citing an anonymous complaint that he is violating environmental regulations. He snorts, shaking his head. Guess who? A few hours later, a county inspector pulls up in a white truck. The man, looking apologetic, steps out with a clipboard. Sorry about this, Mr. Reynolds, he says, adjusting his glasses. We got a complaint about your livestock and soil treatment methods. Hank smirks. Let me guess, Karen? The inspector sighs. I can't say for sure, but yeah, probably. They go through the inspection, and as expected, Hank is fully compliant. His farm is clean, his livestock healthy, and his soil within regulations. The inspector leaves with a handshake and a warning. She's wasting your time and mine. If she keeps making false reports, we might have to take action against her. That should have been the end of it, but Karen, predictably, doesn't stop. Later that afternoon, Hank hears the roar of a bulldozer. He rushes outside to find a landscaping crew standing by his property line, trucks filled with mulch, bushes, and decorative trees. A burly man in an orange vest approaches him with a clipboard. We got an order to begin HOA-mandated beautification. Says here we're authorized to alter the landscaping to align with neighborhood aesthetics. Hank stares at him. Who authorized that? The foreman glances at the clipboard. Karen Pierce, HOA president. Hank lets out a low chuckle. This woman really doesn't quit. The foreman shifts awkwardly. So do we start or not? Hank steps forward, arms crossed. I'd love to see you try. A beat of silence passes. Then the foreman clears his throat. Yeah, nah, we're not doing this. He turns back to his crew. Load it up, boys. We're out of here. Hank laughs as they drive off, but he knows Karen's next move won't be so easy to shut down. And sure enough, that night, it happens. Around 11:01 p.m., floodlights suddenly illuminate his property. The distant hum of a generator and the metallic clang of gates being unlatched echo through the air. Already suspicious, Hank grabs his flashlight and heads outside. At the edge of his land, a group of men in unmarked trucks is unloading animal transport cages. He marches over, anger simmering just beneath the surface. What the hell do you think you're doing? Hank growls. One of the men, lean and mean-looking, shrugs. We're here to remove unauthorized livestock. Hank's fists clench. Who hired you? The man smirks. HOA contract? Karen Pierce? Hank lets out a slow breath, forcing himself to stay calm. This is private property. You're trespassing. You got 5 seconds to leave before I call the sheriff. The smirk doesn't fade. You won't call anyone. A clicking sound makes them all freeze. Hank's neighbor, a retired Marine named Tom, steps out from the shadows, a shotgun resting comfortably in his hands. Wrong, Tom says. He ain't calling anyone. I already did. Just in time, the distant wail of sirens breaks the silence. The men scramble, throwing their gear into their trucks and peeling out before the cops even arrive. Karen, watching from her window across the street, sees it all. She knows she's lost again, but this time, she's not just mad, she's desperate. And that's when she makes her biggest mistake yet. The roar of the trucks fades into the night as the last of the trespassers speed away, leaving behind a mess of scattered fencing and half-loaded animal transport cages. Hank stands at the edge of his property, fists clenched, chest rising and falling in slow, controlled breaths. Tom, his neighbor, keeps his shotgun loosely at his side, eyes trained on the empty road. Then the flashing red and blue lights appear in the distance. Karen is watching from her front window, hands trembling with rage. She can't believe it. Again, this backwoods farmer just won't roll over. She's thrown everything at him, and yet he still stands there like he owns the place. Squad cars pull up, and Hank lets out a sigh. He's getting real tired of seeing the cops on his land. A familiar officer steps out, Deputy Miller, the same one who responded to Karen's false gun report the night before. His eyes immediately go to Hank, then Tom, then to the abandoned cages still sitting in the dirt. Miller crosses his arms. You want to tell me what's going on here? Hank jerks a thumb toward Karen's house. Your favorite HOA president hired some goons to steal my livestock. Tom adds, they showed up unauthorized, no paperwork, tried to load up Hank's animals. We warned them to leave. They ran before you got here. Miller nods, chewing on his lip, then turns to his partner. Get statements. Check for security footage. I want to know exactly who those guys were. Karen, realizing her plan has once again backfired, storms out of her house, silk robe flapping around her in the night breeze. "This is an outrage," she screeches, pointing a manicured finger at Hank. "This man is a menace to our community." She doesn't even look at her. "Ma'am, did you authorize this?" Karen lifts her chin defiantly. "As the HOA president, I have every right to enforce community standards." Hank hasn't moved. "His livestock is a blight, and we had every right to—" Miller raises a hand, silencing her. "Did you file a legal injunction, get a court order? Any documentation at all?" Karen sputters. "The HOA bylaws—" "That's not how the law works, ma'am." Miller sighs, rubbing his temple. "This is criminal trespassing and attempted theft." Karen's face goes pale. This is completely out of proportion." Hank folds his arms. "You called the cops on me last night over nothing. Now that your buddies are the ones breaking the law, suddenly it's an overreaction." Karen's mouth opens and closes like a fish gasping for air. Miller turns to Hank. "Do you want to press charges?" Karen lets out a panicked laugh. "You can't be serious. It was just a misunderstanding. We can talk about this, right?" Hank considers. He could let this go, keep proving her wrong until she eventually gives up. But the thing is, she won't stop. She's crossed the line from annoying to dangerous. He nods. "Yeah, I want to press charges." Karen lets out a high-pitched shriek. "You can't do this." Tom smirks. "Sure can. You know, for someone who claims to love law and order, you sure do break a lot of laws." Miller gestures to another officer. "Go ahead and detain Miss Pierce. We'll be taking her in for questioning." As cuffs click around her wrists, Karen thrashes. "You can't do this to me. I am the HOA." Neighborhood residents peek out of windows, some standing on their porches, watching the drama unfold. A few even start filming. Karen, suddenly aware of the eyes and cameras on her, changes tactics. She slumps, going limp in the officer's grip. "This is police brutality," she moans. "I'm a victim. You're all harassing me." Miller rolls his eyes. "You can explain it to the judge." As Karen is loaded into the back of a squad car, she turns to Hank, eyes filled with venom. "I'll sue you for everything you have." Hank smirks. "Good luck with that." The squad car doors slam shut the moment Karen is driven away. The remaining HOA board members who had been lurking nearby start whispering amongst themselves. They look worried. One of them, an older man named Greg, steps forward. "Hank, listen, He scratches the back of his head. "We didn't know she was going to pull all this. I just thought we were enforcing HOA rules, not committing actual crimes." Hank raises an eyebrow. "So you're telling me none of y'all were in on this?" Greg hesitates, then shakes his head. "Not to this level. And honestly, we're done with her. We need to vote her out before she gets the whole HOA in legal trouble." Hank chuckles. "Bit late for that, don't you think?" Greg looks solemn. "We'll drop any complaints against your farm. Make sure she never pulls this kind of stunt again. Just don't take the whole HOA down with her, okay?" Hank studies the man for a moment. He doesn't trust HOAs in general, but Greg seems like someone who just got caught up in Karen's madness. He shrugs. "That ain't up to me, but you might want to have a long talk with your neighbors about what kind of leadership you want." Greg nods solemnly and walks away. Tom claps Hank on the back. "Well, that was entertaining. Want to grab a beer?" Hank chuckles. "Thought you'd never ask." As they head toward the house, a final thought crosses Hank's mind. Karen might be gone for now, but something tells him she's not the type to go down quietly. And he's right, because Karen has one last trick up her sleeve and it's about to make things a whole lot worse. The night is quiet, the flashing lights of the police cars long gone. But Hank knows better than to believe this is over. Karen may have been hauled away in cuffs, but something tells him she isn't the kind to accept defeat. He isn't wrong. By the next morning, news of Karen's arrest has spread like wildfire. The entire neighborhood is buzzing. HOA members are whispering, debating whether to vote her out before she drags them down with her. But while some are distancing themselves, others, Karen's most loyal followers, are already plotting her return. And Karen? She's about to go nuclear. She's out of jail in under 24 hours. Her charges are serious, but they aren't enough to keep her locked up just yet. The moment she's free, she calls a neighborhood-wide emergency HOA meeting. She needs to do damage control, and fast. The meeting is held at the HOA clubhouse, a pristine, overly decorated building meant to exude authority. The room is packed with residents, board members, and even a few people from outside the neighborhood who've heard about the chaos. Karen, dressed in a sharp blazer and wearing her best concerned community leader expression, steps up to the podium. The murmurs die down. She takes a slow breath, then begins. Friends, neighbors, I stand before you today as a victim of an egregious injustice. I have been vilified, attacked, even arrested, all for doing my duty, for protecting our beautiful neighborhood from the destruction of farmland chaos. A murmur ripples through the crowd. We cannot let lawlessness take over our streets, Karen continues, raising her voice. This farmer, this outsider, is defying our rules, our values. And if we allow him to win, we set a precedent that anyone can do whatever they want with no consequences. Now, some people are nodding. A handful of die-hard HOA loyalists clap. Karen smirks internally. She's reeling them back in. She steps closer to the microphone, lowering her voice just enough to make it sound dramatic. But I have a solution. Silence. Everyone is listening. We will sue Hank Reynolds. Gasps, whispers, then uproar. Some people cheer, some boo, others look completely dumbfounded. One of the HOA board members, Greg, the same man who spoke to Hank the night before, stands up, furious. This is insane, he snaps. Karen, you already called the cops on him twice, and both times you were the one breaking the law. Now you want to drag this entire community into a lawsuit? Karen's face darkens. I am protecting our neighborhood, Greg. Unlike you, I'm willing to do what's necessary. Greg scoffs. No, what's necessary is removing you from power before you bankrupt us all. A huge portion of the room erupts in agreement. Karen grits her teeth. This isn't going the way she planned. That's when a voice calls out from the back of the room. Hey, Karen, you still going to explain what you did with all that HOA money? The room goes dead silent. Karen's expression freezes. The man who spoke, Mark, the young neighbor who recorded Hank's police encounter, steps forward, holding up a stack of documents. Because, I was looking through the HOA's financial reports, and I found something real interesting. Karen's mask cracks. Mark waves the papers in the air. Turns out someone's been moving large sums of HOA funds into a personal account. Gasps, murmurs. Mark's eyes lock onto Karen. You want to explain that? Karen panics. This is a smear campaign, she hisses. You're lying, Mark grins. Cool, so you won't mind if we audit the HOA's financials, right? I mean, if you're innocent, you got nothing to worry about. Karen's face drains of color. Greg and the other board members immediately seize on this. Karen, Greg says, dead serious, I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in your leadership. I second it, another member chimes in. Karen realizes what's happening. She's losing control. She slams her hands on the podium. You can't do this to me. I am the HOA. Greg ignores her. All in favor of removing Karen Pierce as HOA president, raise your hand. Nearly every single hand goes up. Karen stares in horror. Traitors, she shrieks. Greg turns back to her. Karen Pierce, effective immediately. You are no longer president of this HOA. The room erupts. Karen, shaking with rage, grabs her purse and storms out of the meeting. But she isn't done yet. Hank is back on his farm, enjoying a well-earned beer when he sees it. Karen, standing at the edge of his property, her face twisted with rage. In her hands, a gasoline canister. For a split second, Hank thinks she's lost her damn mind. She's muttering to herself, eyes wild, gripping the canister like it's her last chance at vengeance. Then she starts pouring gasoline on his crops. Hank drops his beer. Hey! He roars, sprinting toward her. Karen fumbles with a lighter. I'll burn it all! You think you can humiliate me? Take everything from me! Hank tackles her just as she flicks the lighter open. The two hit the dirt, Karen kicking and screaming. Within seconds, Tom and a few neighbors rush over, yanking Karen off Hank. One of them has already called the cops. By the time squad cars arrive, Karen is sobbing hysterically, her hands tied behind her back with zip ties. Miller, the deputy, takes one look at the gasoline, the lighter, and the absolute insanity in Karen's eyes and shakes his head. "This time," he mutters, "you're not getting out so easy." They haul Karen into the back of the squad car for the second time in 2 days, and this time, she isn't coming back. The scent of gasoline still lingers in the air as the red and blue lights flash against the dark sky. Karen is shoved into the back of the squad car, her face twisted in a mix of rage and desperation. Deputy Miller slams the door shut and turns to Hank. "You okay?" Hank exhales slowly, dusting himself off. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just didn't expect her to lose it this bad." Tom, standing nearby with his shotgun slung over his shoulder, chuckles. "I don't know, Hank. I did say she was the type to go nuclear." Hank shakes his head. "Yeah, but arson. She actually tried to burn my damn farm." Miller steps forward, rubbing his temple. "Well, this time she's not walking away with just a slap on the wrist. Attempted arson, destruction of property, and trespassing. This is serious." Karen's muffled screams echo from inside the squad car. She's still fighting, arguing, still in complete denial. "You're all corrupt. You're setting me up. I was just defending my community." Miller ignores her and looks at Hank. "You pressing charges?" Hank lets out a slow breath. He doesn't even have to think about it. "Damn right I am." Miller nods. "Good, because at this point it's not just your case anymore. We ran her financials after that HOA meeting. Turns out she wasn't just a nightmare of a neighbor. She was embezzling tens of thousands from the HOA. Hank raises an eyebrow. "That's so?" Miller smirks. "And that means this is no longer just a trespassing case. The county is coming after her now." For the first time since this mess started, Hank actually grins. The aftermath begins. By the next morning, the entire town knows. Karen's mugshot is plastered all over local news. The headline, HOA president arrested for attempted arson and embezzlement. It turns out Karen's reign of terror wasn't just about controlling Hank's farm. She had been skimming thousands of dollars from HOA fees for years, using the money to fund her luxurious lifestyle, including expensive vacations, designer clothes, and private spa treatments. Now it's all unraveling. The HOA board immediately calls an emergency meeting. With Karen officially removed from power, they scramble to figure out how much damage she's done. But it gets worse, because some of the homeowners, the very people who had supported Karen, realize they might be liable for the mess she created. "We trusted her," Greg, the board member, mutters, looking over the financial reports. "We let her run things for too long without asking questions, and now we're screwed." Lawsuits start flooding in. Residents demand their stolen money back. Some of them want the HOA dissolved completely. And Hank? He's just sitting back enjoying the show. Karen's final fall. Karen's trial moves fast, with overwhelming evidence stacked against her, including security footage of her trying to burn Hank's farm and bank records proving the embezzlement. She doesn't stand a chance. Her lawyer tries everything, claims of mental distress, arguing that she was set up, even blaming Hank for provoking her. But the judge isn't buying any of it. In the end, Karen is found guilty on multiple charges, including attempted arson, criminal trespassing, filing a false police report, and embezzlement. The sentencing is brutal. Karen gets 7 years in prison with mandatory restitution to the homeowners she stole from. When she hears the verdict, she loses it completely, jumping up, screaming at the judge, the jury, and Hank. "This is a conspiracy. I am the victim. I built that community, made it what it is." The bailiffs move in, grabbing her by the arms as she thrashes wildly. "You're all traitors. You'll regret this. I'll be back. The courtroom doors slam shut behind her. Karen Pierce, once the reigning queen of the HOA, is now finished. With Karen out of the picture, the HOA crumbles. The remaining board members resign, unwilling to face the fallout. A few residents attempt to salvage it, but it's a futile effort. Too many voices clamor for dissolution. A formal vote seals its fate. The HOA is abolished. The neighborhood finally breathes free. And Hank, he finds himself in an unexpected position. With the HOA gone, no one can dictate his actions anymore. He expands his farm, selling fresh produce directly to locals, including those who once backed Karen. His business thrives. One day, Greg, formerly one of Karen's staunchest supporters, ventures to Hank's farm stand, visibly uneasy. Hank raises an eyebrow. "Didn't expect to see you here." Greg shifts awkwardly. "Yeah, well, maybe we misunderstood you. You're not the villain Karen painted you as." Hank chuckles, though a part of him remains uncertain. "Took you long enough." Greg sighs. "Mind if I buy some fresh eggs?" Hank smirks, though there's a hint of hesitation. "You sure can afford them without those HOA fees." Greg groans. "Okay, I had that coming." They share a reluctant laugh. Then, a surprise. Months later, Hank sorts through his mail and spots an envelope with no return address. Intrigued, he opens it to find a handwritten letter from Karen. "Hank, I was wrong. I see that now. I've lost everything, my home, my money, my reputation. Now I sit in a cell wondering how it all went so wrong. Maybe I deserve this. Maybe I went too far. But I can't change the past. I just wanted to say I'm sorry." Hank gazes at the letter, conflicted. Could Karen truly change? After a long pause, he crumples it up and throws it into the fire. Some people can change, but Karen? He isn't sure. And that, my friends, is how an HOA Karen lost everything because she tangled with the wrong farmer. Ever faced an entitled HOA nightmare? Share your stories in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe for more unbelievable HOA drama. You won't want to miss what's coming next.